Hello people, my name is Maria and welcome to Badger Fox Art Studio. So we are back with Margit from Elden Ring, my boy, absolute unit, we love him. This here grayscale painting was created in the last video that I did, and it was worked in a chalk pastel brush. It's a default brush in Krita and it's very detailed, and in this video we are going to be colorizing it again in Krita. So it's currently grayscale and I am going to be making it color. It's a little bit of a disclaimer, I'm not saying this is how you should go about coloring. This is just my process, my personal process, and I am also experimenting with this because this isn't usually how I'd approach digital art. I'm usually doing things completely different, but I like to learn, I like to try new things. So yeah, this is my process of doing it. There's probably simpler ways of colorizing a piece, but this is just my way of doing it. So yeah, if you want to watch that original painting, the grayscale painting, I will link it here. And so without further ado, let us hop into the video, shall we? So the very first thing that I did was duplicated my grayscale layer, and I'm going in and just editing the color tones and playing with that little graph there for a while until I get some sort of an undertone that I like. And then I'm going into using the color balance tool and just playing with those so that I could create some color interest in the shadows, the midtones, and the highlights. And what I'm applying those effects as a layered mask so that layer is actually preserved still. And then the next step that I'm doing, I've created a new layer and I have switched the blending mode to color, and I'm just simply painting onto that layer. I'm using the same chalk pastel brush as I used to paint the original sketch. And the reason why I did that is I just felt a lot more comfortable that the edges were going to be more consistent, just that the colors going into each other were more consistent, and just, you know, it just made it look a bit more natural. Originally I had used an airbrush to create sort of like a more painterly effect, and what I had done was I duplicated the grayscale layer and I did an overlay of just like general color blocking with an airbrush, and then I flattened to a new layer. So I created a new layer from the visible layers and started to blend things in to try and make it into a more painterly looking thing. And the thing that I didn't like about that was that it lost the original textures that I had become very attached to in the original piece. So I started over and started just doing everything on a color layer. And now I am working in sections on this, so I've gone in and I've just started with the face. Obviously I did the background first because I wanted that out of the way, and I worked cool tones for the background because I wanted the figure obviously to stand out a lot more, and there's more warm tones in the figure. So I am mixing these tones in section by section, so working up all the tones, trying to figure out the colors. And you may see every now and again I'm going back to that original grayscale layer, and I am using an airbrush to darken some areas because they didn't really come out to like dark enough to be able to see them on the color layer. And that's why I had said in part 1 that if I was to do this again, I would make my starting canvas color, basically, I would use a darker color for that. And this is the reason, because I ended up with too light of colors around his face and stuff, and the color just didn't blend properly into it. So as I said, I'm working section by section. I did the face first, and then I did the hair. I think I started doing the back horns first, and then I did the hair. So I'm just working up the layers. And now we're doing the other horns, and I'm trying to... you will see that I will be sticking with a lot of similar tones. I am working out the tones that I'm going to be working on as I go, but I typically will stick with the same tones so that there's a lot more consistency in the color palette. I often do this when I am like doing an actual painting, like a traditional painting in acrylics or oils. I will try and use the same colors over and over again. I don't want to muddy up things by using too many colors. Now, there are a lot of tones in here, but they're very earthy tones. So there's a lot of reds, yellows, greens, all those sort of like browns. They're very earthy tones, and that's really the color scheme of Margit. He's very earthy. He's a natural boy. So yeah. And the way that I'm actually choosing color as well is another thing that I want to talk about. Because there are so many tones and textures going on here, and a lot of textures are actually built up by the colors as well. And you'll mostly see this in his clothes, which I'm starting now. Now, I didn't do it so much here, but I started to do it again further down, because I think here is where I pretty much stopped. I was like an hour recording, and I said, right, I'll stop and I'll continue it another day. And it was a couple of days, and I came back to it, and I started like approaching the coloring in a slightly different way. And that different way was, instead of just trying to block in different tones, was I picked a general color that felt right. So if something felt green, I painted it green and then layered up tones of red and yellow on top of that. And that may sound obvious, but it was quite a fun thing to be able to just look at something and go, what does that feel like? It feels like green. And then it made it actually a lot easier than just going, okay, there's a bit of green there, so I'm going to color a bit of green. There's a bit of red there, I'm going to color that red, you know. I hope that makes sense. But it was very handy for a painting like this, where there are so many different tones going on in the painting, and you need some sort of a color underneath just to ground everything. And things started to look a lot more consistent in the color when I started doing the color like that. So we're still flying away here with the colors. And yeah. This, I'm definitely going to make this into a print, I think. Well, I kind of want to see, would people actually be interested in a print? So while we're coloring, actually, just a quick question. Would you like this as a print? Would you be interested in this as a print? I don't know how many people would be, but if you are, let me know down in the comments section below, and I will get on top of that, because I quite like it. I'll probably print it out myself for personal use. I want to get more art put up on the ceiling of my studio. If you haven't watched my studio tour, by the way, go and watch that. That's been up for a while, I think since the start of November. So yeah, the ceiling of my studio. I work in a converted garden shed, so my ceiling is quite low. It's wooden, so I can stick things up, and I want to start doing that. It'll be quite fun. Especially like putting my own art up there. I think it'd be fun to just like, yeah, this is a piece I like, so I'm just gonna slap that up there. So I'll definitely add Margit to that. And we're almost done here with the colorization, so I might as well get back to talking about that. Just adding some finishing tones on the arm. So the tones are, when you look at Margit, he has very grey looking skin, and if you look very closely, then there's other tones slipping in there. There's like greens and yellows and red around the fingers, and that's typically how you make skin really come alive, is by adding those other tones and not just going in with a straight skin color. You know, obviously you do that first and then you layer up the tones, and I love how it looks. I'm really glad that I discovered that and started doing it. Anyway, what we're doing here now is we have created a new layer, and we switched it to multiply mode, so that we could just deepen some of the areas and give the areas of shadow, sorry, deepen some of the areas of shadow, and then also create a more consistent tone, so a more uniform tone. Now we are on to the highlights. So we have created a new layer and we are using the luminosity setting. It's luminosity something else. I'll put it up in caption when I figure out what it's like properly called, so that you know yourself. And this is a very glowy layer, but it still retains a little bit more of color. So I am using a very pale white because the lighting in this image is very warm, and I wanted to keep some of that warmth in the highlights as well. Oftentimes you'll be told to use the opposite of what you're doing for the highlights, so that they pop a little bit more, which maybe, but there's a general feeling of warmth in this layer, in this painting, so I just said I'd continue with that because, I don't know, I think the cool tones for the highlights would look a bit odd. But anyway, yeah, I was doing a lot of highlighting here on the horns, and what I was also doing was I would go in with a blender every now and again and smooth out the marks to create a sort of a bloom effect, really. So bloom is it's a sort of a lighting thing that you will see a lot in games where things look very glowy. They look very pretty. So I wanted to kind of replicate that a bit. And as you can see, I talked about going away from my style in part 1. And yeah, definitely leaning more on the references here. So I had been turning it off and on. You may have seen me do that, just to reassure myself that it was making a difference. And that's just literally with every art piece that I'm doing. When I'm adding highlights, I am always like just turning that layer off and on, so that I can reassure myself that it is making a difference, and it does make a difference. Also, thing that I love about highlights is you can add a lot more detail with hair when it comes to highlights. So a lot of the flyaways I was able to put in flyaways tend to catch the light a lot, so they can be added in the highlights layer. It's a small detail, but I really enjoy it. It just makes it a lot better. So I'm going around to other areas with the highlights. I was mostly focusing on the horns, the hair, and the face. I did a little bit on the clothing, like around the collar and around that sort of like rope thingy that he has around his neck. Not too much, not a great deal. Also on his arms, or his arm and his hand, like those, with the hair and stuff, obviously would be catching light, and there was some highlights, and I wanted that to kind of stick out as well. And also the staff. Now the staff benefited a lot, and I think this screenshot is from when, you go to fight him as Margit, the Omen King, and, his staff is about to change into that really cool sword that he uses. And there was those like glitters of sort of the magic or whatever like coming through, so especially up around the top, and that really benefited with the highlights layer. So I'm just going in, just finishing off a few more bits, and now what I'm doing is I have created an overlay layer, and I'm going in with the blue and yellow tones, just dotting it around with an airbrush to give some more interest to the lighting, and I tend to do this a lot in other art as well. You will have seen me do that before. So anyway, we are coming to the end of the video, and that is the colorization. That is my process for coloring Margit, the fell Omen. So here we have the finished result, and I am super duper happy with it. Here is Margit in all his glory. Now I do realize that I kind of went back on what I said in part 1 of this video with the whole sometimes you can simply have too many layers, and I ended up using a lot of layers just to colorize this piece, but yeah, such is life. I really couldn't figure out what way to colorize it without using too many layers. I may experiment further sometimes. I am interested in trying some different methods of colorization, maybe on a different piece of artwork. Maybe try a more painterly method. I did love those chalk pastel textures, which is why I stuck with them. But yeah, maybe I'll try something else in the future and see how that goes. I'm also very interested in trying to draw Margit again, but in my own style, in my actual own sort of more cartoony style. I think that'd be fun, you know, line art and all that stuff. So I may do that in the future. I may take a notion. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that some of you found it helpful as well. I would like to make more of these videos in the future, and if you want to see that kind of content, please consider supporting me on my Ko-fi. I will leave a link in the description of this video. You can buy something from my shop, or you can support me with a one-off donation. If you can't afford to do that, that's perfectly all right. What you can do is you can go and follow me on my social media, like share my stuff. You can like this video and leave a comment. And if you haven't done so already, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It really, really helps the channel out, and it is free for you people. So I hope you have a good day. Stay creative, my people, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!